In this lecture, I'd like to present some additional information about the PowerPoint slides for Chapter 1. I won't be going over all the slides, so I encourage you to view them as well as read the chapter and, of course, take the chapter quiz and complete the discussion board for this chapter. First, I'd like to discuss some of the differences between social psychology and some closely related disciplines. Social psychology focuses on how social situations influence individuals. This makes it part of psychology because we look at individuals, but it's social because we focus on how the social environment influences the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors of individuals. This is distinct from personality psychology, which focuses on intra-individual variables as opposed to the inter-individual variables in social psychology. It's also distinct from sociology, which focuses on the behaviors of groups rather than on individuals. Sociology and social psychology are closely related, but they are not exactly the same thing. One of the most important and controversial studies in social psychology is Stanley Milgram's obedience study, sometimes known as the shock study. In this experiment, individuals were told that they would teach another individual to learn word association pairs by punishing them for making mistakes. In fact, no one was ever actually shocked in this experiment. The shock levels started very low, 15 volts, and proceeded up to 450 volts. Again, no one actually received the shocks, and the person who was supposedly being punished actually was playing a recording of his responses. These range from mild complaints to screaming, to silence at the higher levels. Whenever the study participants expressed reluctance to carry on with the experimenter, wearing a lab coat, would give them 1, 2, or 3 standardized prompts to get them to continue. The distressing finding of this study was that almost 2/3 of participants continued to the highest level of shock, even after the person serving as the learner complained of a heart condition and then ceased to respond at all. Because of the distress felt by the participants, it is very unlikely that this experiment could be conducted in the United States again today. However, it has been and was repeated multiple times in various circumstances with essentially the same results. Milgram's interpretation was that the experiment showed that the environmental cues overwhelm people's moral misgivings about harming another individual. We'll get into more of the effects of the environment later in the course. Attributions are the explanations we give for people's behavior, our own and other people's. One of these attributions that we make consistently, to the point that it has been named the fundamental attribution error, is the subject of this slide. The fundamental attribution error is failing to recognize or underestimating the impact of situational influences on behavior, such as in the Milgram experiment, along with overemphasizing personal factors or individual dispositions, internal factors. That is, we tend to explain other people's behavior mostly in terms of that's just the way that person is, as opposed to that's what happens when you put a person in that situation. And we do this consistently and automatically. This error is not seen equally in all societies. Individualistic societies, such as the United States, tend to show higher rates of this particular cognitive error. Another cognitive error that we tend to make are stereotypes. These are beliefs that certain attributes are characteristic of members of a particular group. When we do this, we tend to expect to see and perceive that attribute among all members of the group, when in fact it may be characteristic of only a small number or even none of the members of the group. Humans have two basic types of cognitive processing. Most of the time, we're using automatic processing. Our thoughts, feelings, behaviors are involuntary, unconscious, implicit. That is, we do things without thinking very deeply about them. Consider walking across the room. If you had to think about every muscle movement that went into that and plan exactly what you were going to do, you'd quickly fall down and hurt yourself. Controlled processing occurs in a minority of our interactions with the world. We think consciously, systematically, and deliberately about something. We're able to override our implicit attitudes and beliefs. This takes a great deal of energy, as the brain uses about 20% of the glucose in the body, even though it only takes up approximately 2% of the body weight. All human cultures vary along a continuum, from very independent, individualistic cultures to very collectivist. Independent or individualistic cultures tend to be those in which people see themselves as distinct individual entities that are tied together in a voluntary way, but who are each responsible for their own individuals' thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Interdependent or collectivist cultures tend to see the individual as part of the group. The group is more important. These cultures recognize group influences on behavior as being more salient than individual influences. Again, there are no cultures which are completely individualistic or collectivist. Every one of these varies somewhere along that continuum.